Today, we are revealing a shocking truth about Elvis Presley. In his final years, the king of rock and roll was exhausted by fame and desperately wanted to escape it all for a peaceful life. What if he actually did? Some believe Elvis didn't die in 1977 but reinvented himself as Pastor Bob Joyce, a preacher in Arkansas. The resemblance is uncanny, his voice almost too familiar. But the most important questions: could it be true? The official story of Elvis's death. August 16, 1977. The world awoke to a day that was a full stop of an era. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was found unresponsive in his Graceland bathroom by his fiancée, Ginger Alden. It was the most guarded part of his mansion, a place where few ever entered. By the time the news broke, the world was stunned. At just 42 years old, Elvis, the man whose voice defined a generation and whose swiveling hips redefined music forever, was declared dead of cardiac arrhythmia. The grief was crushing, but the details surrounding his death, those were very confusing from the start. The official report, conducted by Shelby County Coroner Dr. Jerry Francisco, stated Elvis died from a heart attack caused by hypertensive cardiovascular disease associated with arteriosclerotic heart disease. It was a perfectly reasonable explanation for a man whose lifestyle and health struggles were no secret. But the question is, why wasn't the report signed until October 20, more than 2 months after Elvis's death? Why the delay? And why did the Presley family insist on keeping the full autopsy report private, locked away from the public for 50 years? Under Tennessee law, this means the complete findings won't be accessible until 2027. For some, this privacy seemed to suggest there was more to Elvis's death than what met the eye. Health-wise, the king was in decline. He was plagued by hypertension, diabetes, and an enlarged colon, a condition that often left him in pain and contributed to his infamous chronic constipation. These issues saw him hospitalized 4 times in the 5 years before his death. Some reports even suggest that on the day he died, he may have been straining during a bowel movement which put extreme pressure on his heart. His longtime doctor, George Nicopalos, admitted that Elvis had relied heavily on prescription drugs, though he defended the singer as having abused them accidentally. However, others, including Elvis's stepbrother and former bodyguard, David Stanley, painted a bleaker picture. In his memoir, Stanley described Elvis as a man increasingly dependent on medication, noting that his role often felt less like security and more like babysitting. Despite this, the official ruling cleared drugs as the direct cause of death, though their presence in his system raised eyebrows. Fans wondered if the full truth had been buried along with him. And speaking of burials, this was another area that fueled the fire of speculation. Elvis's funeral was held just 2 days after his death, a remarkably quick turnaround for a global icon. The speed of the arrangements left little room for questioning or further investigation. Why rush the burial of one of the most famous figures in modern history? To grieving fans, it felt weird. To skeptics, it felt suspicious. And then there was the tombstone. At Graceland, the king's final resting place is marked with a stone that bears his full name, Elvis Aaron Presley. But for years, Elvis himself had spelled his middle name as Aaron, with a single A, not Aaron, with double A. The sudden switch confused his most devoted followers. Some considered it a deliberate clue that Elvis wasn't truly buried there. Was it a mistake? A quiet family decision? Or was it a sign that the king had planned his own disappearance? If these were the only oddities, perhaps the theories wouldn't have grown so persistent. But reports of Elvis's sightings began almost immediately after his funeral. He was seen at an airport, boarding a plane under the name John Burroughs, a known alias Elvis had used in life. He was spotted at diners, gas stations, and even in Kalamazoo, Michigan. These stories became so widespread they bordered on folklore. Fans couldn't ignore the idea that Elvis had chosen to fake his death to escape the crushing weight of fame. After all, Graceland had become more of a gilded cage than a home. Was it so far-fetched to believe he might want a way out? Adding to the mystery was Graceland itself. While the estate was open to the public in 1982, the upstairs portion of the mansion, the very place where Elvis spent his final hours, remained sealed. Officially, this is out of respect for the family. But for conspiracy theorists, it's a compelling detail. What secrets might be locked behind those doors? Elvis's death may have officially been ruled as natural causes. Still, the inconsistencies, from the delayed report to the twists surrounding his burial, have kept the door wide open for speculation. It's no wonder fans couldn't let go. The idea that Elvis might still be alive, living a simpler, quieter life somewhere, offered comfort to those who refused to say goodbye. But even in this swirl of rumors, one particular name has emerged: Pastor Bob Joyce. A man who bears a striking resemblance to the king and possesses a voice that sounds eerily familiar. Could Elvis have traded the stage for the pulpit? Could the king of rock and roll now lead an Arkansas congregation? These questions remain, and the answers may be closer than you think. Let's take a closer look at the man who has reignited the belief that Elvis never truly left the building. Pastor Bob Joyce. Fast forward to the quiet town of Benton, Arkansas, where Pastor Bob Joyce leads his congregation in faith and music. At first glance, he seems like any other small-town pastor: a kind smile, a deep love for gospel hymns, and a powerful voice that fills the room during worship. But to many, Pastor Bob is more than just a man of faith. They see something extraordinary, even otherworldly. The reason? His uncanny resemblance to none other than Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. Let's not mince words. When you see Pastor Bob, it's like looking at an older Elvis who traded his sequins for sermons. The sharp jawline, the piercing blue eyes, the unmistakable nose, every feature screams Elvis. It's not just his face, though. Fans have pored over video clips, dissecting his movements and gestures. The way he holds a microphone, the subtle tilt of his head, and even his smile all feel eerily familiar, as if the king never truly left the building. But what really gets people talking is his voice. Oh, that voice. When Pastor Bob sings hymns during his church services, it's like stepping back in time. Rich, soulful, and filled with emotion, his tone seems to carry the very essence of Elvis. Side-by-side comparisons of Elvis's performances and Pastor Bob's worship songs have flooded the internet. In some clips, you'd swear they are the same person. Close your eyes, and it's 1970 all over again, with the king serenading his fans. Open them, and you see a man of God leading his flock. Is it a coincidence? For believers in the theory, this is more than coincidence. They argue that no one could mimic Elvis's voice, mannerisms, and charisma so perfectly unless they were, well, Elvis himself. The king was known for his deep spirituality later in life, often reading the Bible and seeking meaning beyond the bright lights of fame. Could it be that Elvis, overwhelmed by the pressures of his stardom, chose to leave it all behind for a quieter, more meaningful life as Pastor Bob Joyce? It sounds wild, but the clues make it hard to dismiss entirely. Of course, not everyone is convinced. Skeptics point out that Pastor Bob is simply a man blessed with a strong resemblance to Elvis. After all, the king had millions of fans and imitators. Could Pastor Bob be one of them, albeit unintentionally? Maybe his voice. The gestures and mannerisms of Pastor Bob Joyce could naturally reflect growing up in Elvis's cultural shadow, or perhaps the internet has turned mere coincidences into full-blown conspiracies. Yet the evidence keeps piling up for believers, with some fans claiming to notice subtle nods to his supposed former life during his sermons. They believe he pauses as if holding back memories too big to share and avoids direct questions about Elvis, further fueling speculation. Pastor Bob hasn't shied away from the attention, directly denying any connection to Elvis, but his denials have done little to silence the rumors. For every explanation he provides, a new theory emerges, leaving many to wonder if he is genuinely just Pastor Bob, a preacher with a striking resemblance to the king. This theory ignites passionate discussions, with fans worldwide flocking to his church or tuning into online services, hoping to catch a glimpse of Elvis or simply enjoying the mystery that keeps his legacy alive in a unique way. The striking resemblance, the voice comparisons, and the charisma shared by Pastor Bob and Elvis Presley lead many to question if the king of rock and roll could have reborn as a man of faith. Fans dissect his sermons, analyzing every gesture and vocal quirk, while Pastor Bob's deep spirituality aligns with Elvis's well-documented faith in his later years, when he often sought solace in the Bible and gospel music. This alignment gives weight to the possibility that Elvis might have wanted to escape fame for a simpler, peaceful life. Many fans claim to feel an emotional connection when hearing Pastor Bob's voice, reminiscent of Elvis's powerful performances, and others note his avoidance of certain topics as if hiding a part of his past. While skeptics argue the resemblance is coincidental and the vocal similarities stem from shared love for gospel music, believers remain captivated, questioning whether Pastor Bob is simply a preacher or Elvis living a second act. Skeptics point out inconsistencies, such as facial analysis showing differences in bone structure and Pastor Bob's well-documented life history, which leaves no room for a secret rock star past. Moreover, they argue that the theory persists because it is psychologically comforting to believe a beloved icon like Elvis chose a life of peace and spirituality rather than truly departing. The King's immense influence has inspired countless imitators, and skeptics suggest Pastor Bob might be subconsciously channeling his idol. While this theory may seem unlikely, its enduring appeal lies in its blend of nostalgia, hope, and mystery, keeping fans wondering whether the connection could hold a shred of truth or if it's time to close the book on this intriguing story. Here is the text condensed into a single paragraph. So why does this theory persist? Why do so many fans hold on to the idea that Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, might still be alive, living a quieter life as Pastor Bob Joyce? The answer lies in something deeper than logic, something emotional, even universal. For many, it's not just about whether the theory is true, it's about the hope and comfort it provides. Elvis wasn't just a musician, he was an icon. His voice, charisma, and larger-than-life persona made him feel like family to millions. When he died in 1977, it left a hole in the hearts of his fans. For some, that kind of loss is hard to accept. The idea that Elvis might still be out there, singing gospel hymns in an Arkansas church, is a way to keep his spirit alive. It's not about evidence, it's about connection. Pastor Bob's presence perfectly fits this longing. His voice has that familiar richness, that soulfulness that defined Elvis's music. Listening to him sing can transport fans back to another time, a time when Elvis's songs filled every corner of their lives. It's like hearing an echo from the past. For a moment, they are not just listening to a preacher. They are reliving the magic of the king himself. There's also a sense of justice in the theory. Elvis struggled under the crushing weight of fame, a life so public that even his private moments became tabloid fodder. For fans, the idea that he might have escaped all that, swapping his gold records for the gospel and finding peace in spirituality, is deeply satisfying. It's a happy ending to a story otherwise filled with heartache. And then there's nostalgia. For many, Elvis represents a simpler, more golden time. Believing that he's still out there, living humbly, allows them to hold on to those memories. Pastor Bob becomes more than just a preacher, he symbolizes everything fans love about Elvis. Whether or not the theory is true almost doesn't matter. What matters is how it makes them feel. Of course, this kind of belief is powerful. It's why sightings of Elvis have been reported for decades and why the internet is full of side-by-side comparisons, vocal analyses, and heartfelt fan stories. These aren't just wild conspiracies, they are expressions of love for a man who left an indelible mark on the world. The fact that people still care so much, all these years later, speaks volumes about Elvis's enduring legacy. Whether Pastor Bob is Elvis or someone with an uncanny resemblance and an incredible voice, one thing is clear. The King's influence lives on. His music, his charisma, and the hope he inspired will never fade. So, could this theory be true? Or is it simply a beautiful way for fans to keep the memory of Elvis alive? Either way, it's a story that shows just how much the King still means to us all. As Elvis's iconic moments blend into Pastor Bob's powerful sermons, one big question remains unanswered. Could Pastor Bob be the king of rock and roll living a secret second life? The clues are fascinating, but the truth? That's up to you to decide. So, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this.